Hello and welcome to this special edition of the Two Robbies podcast. I'm Robbie Mustoe and of course I'm joined by my mate Robbie Earle, but that's not all. Today we are joined by a very special guest, Brighton and Hove Albion CEO and Deputy Chairman Paul Barber.
That's right, Musty. Paul's been at the helm at Brighton since 2012 when he led the club in its rise from the Championship through to European contenders in the Premier League. He's also helped oversee a cutting-edge data-driven recruitment system that brought in and sold players like Yves Bissouma, Alexis McAllister, Leandro Trossard, Moises Caicedo to the South Coast Club. And Paul, we're absolutely delighted and excited to have you here today. And I'm just thinking that they don't do a Ballon d'Or for CEOs, do they? Because I know 2012 you won CEO of the Year. In 2016 you won the Sports Executive of the Year. In 2023 you were given an OBE by a Queen for services to football. So I was thinking maybe a Ballon d'Or contestant if they did one for CEO.
No, leave that to the real performers, Robbie. Yeah, the guys on the pitch are the most important people in the game, and delighted to see those guys get the recognition. We just try and make things happen behind the scenes, and that's the best place for us, I think.
Paul, just in 2012, Paul, you'd been abroad and Vancouver Whitecaps part of the MLS at the time. What was it that drew you to Brighton, and what was part of the challenge that you had going in at the football club at that time? I mean, 12 years ago from now.
Yeah, first of all, I had a fantastic three seasons in MLS. I really enjoyed working in Vancouver, enjoyed being part of North American soccer for a period. But I missed English football, to be honest. I missed the intensity and the challenge that comes with English football and the pyramid system, the threat of relegation, the joy of promotion, and that really drew me back. And I met Tony Bloom, Brighton's owner, in 2012, and he sold me a vision for the club, which I really found attractive and exciting, and convinced me that it would be a good place to sort of land back in the UK. And to be honest, here we are sort of 13 years later, and I've not regretted that at all. It's been an amazing journey. Great owner, fantastic football club, great city to live in. And obviously we've been fortunate enough to have a relative degree of success on the field, which has been a really exciting ride for us.
Paul, just the relationship with Tony Bloom again is fascinating because we've heard a lot about Tony Bloom and his kind of statistical and data-based kind of recruitment and strategies. How do you divide up responsibilities and workload within the football club?
Well, I do the work, Tony pays for it, I suppose, is the best way of summing it up. No, I mean, we've got a brilliant relationship because, I always find, with owners of football clubs and chairmen is that you want them to be engaged and involved and committed. But at the same time, you also want them to let you and the executive team, get on with the job of running the club because that's what they pay you to do. And Tony's a brilliant blend of all of those things. He's engaged, he's committed, he loves the club, he wants to be around it and part of it, but at the same time he also knows that running a football club is a full-time job, which he hasn't got the time to do, and he employs people like me and the team I have around me to do just that for him, and he allows us to get on with it. He's always there supporting us and encouraging us and helping us wherever we need it. But essentially, he's the perfect combination of an engaged owner, but one that lets his executive team get on with running the club.
Paul, as a CEO, I'm interested because I think as maybe pundits, as some fans, certainly fans over here, they probably feel the CAO responsibility is just the first team football, what we see on a Saturday. But is your job more than that? Do you have other roles, the academy, women's football, other roles that are part of the club?
Yeah, I mean, I always talk about my job as being the person whose job it is to create the best possible environment for our teams to win matches. And the clue there is teams. There's lots of teams in this club. The men's first team are obviously the highest profile at the moment in terms of where they are in the Premier League, the income that we generate from that. But the women's first team in the Women's Super League currently in the top four there as well, doing very well. We've got the under-21s for the men, the same for the women's. We've then got two academies, boys and girls. We've then got our disability teams. We've got a charitable foundation. And we've got a whole bunch of people behind all of the teams, the team off the pitch, if you like, that makes all of these athletes perform and helps them to perform. So my job is really to to act as almost like a conductor in an orchestra, and bringing all of these moving parts together to create the best possible sound, I suppose would be the best way of describing it. But no 2 days are the same in this job. It's one of the reasons I love it so much. Today's been interviewing candidates for a new senior role that we're hiring for. Later on today, there's some more media and sponsor work to do. Tomorrow, there's an entire day just working on football related matters. But the most important thing in my job is to allow the experts to perform. And, I'm not a coach, so I don't coach the team. I'm not a player recruitment specialist, so we've got a team that does that. I'm not a finance guy, so I've got a team that does that. My job is to try and bring all those people together to give us the best chance of winning matches. And that's really what my job's about.
Paul, we'll get to the recruitment process in a second, but you touched on something there that's really interesting and so different from me and Robbie when we were back in the UK like 16 odd years ago. The advent and the progression of women's and girls soccer. I mean, it's remarkable when I look over there and see what's happening with the professional league and the development and all the girls playing. What are Brighton doing to kind of help that process?
Well, we took a decision probably around 8 years ago now, just before we got to the men's Premier League, to really invest and focus on women and girls football. And it's been a really important journey for us, because part of that was, first of all, making sure that the women's and girls side of our football club was treated equally as the men's and boys. That meant improving the facilities that the women have for training, preparing for matches, recovering from matches. So they've now got a purpose-built training facility within our men's and boys training facility, which is designed for them. The gym equipment is designed for female athletes, not male athletes. The dressing rooms are designed for female athletes, not male athletes. So it's purpose-built. And the next stage of that work that we're doing is to build the first women's-specific football stadium in the UK. And again, it may seem a bit strange when I'm sitting here in a beautiful American Express stadium, but actually there are lots of design features in this stadium that don't play as well for the women's game as they do for the men's game. For example, if I was to take you down to our men's dressing room here, there would be 3 cubicles for going to the toilet at half time. Well, if you've got a team of women and there's 20 players and 10 female members of staff, 30 people want to go to the loo at half time, it's going to be a bit of a crush with just 2 or 3 cubicles. So even the dressing rooms are not really designed for elite female athletes or elite female teams. And our view is, if we want our women's team to perform at the highest possible level, we've got to treat the athletes with the same respect as we treat the male athletes. And the more we looked at it, the more we felt that a purpose-built stadium would be better. And we're now looking at probably 30 to 40 different design features within that stadium, both for the athletes and also for the spectators, that are going to be different to the features we have here in the main stadium for the men's team. So, we're looking to do that. It's an incredible investment from the chairman, but we think it will help accelerate the growth of the women's game in our part of the country. But at the same time, most importantly, respecting the female athletes to perform at the highest level they can. So we're excited about that, and we're looking forward to moving on with that project as soon as we can.
I mean, it's an incredible investment, Paul, and probably setting the way, showing some of these bigger clubs actually in terms of, might be big names, but don't seem to be putting the same effort and concentration into the women's game. When we talk at Brighton now, I think everybody talks about recruitment and the systems that are in place. I mean, it used to be, do you remember the black box at Southampton? Everybody used to be like, what's this black box? What have they got? I mean, talk to us a little bit about this data recruitment and what it's meant to the football club.
Well, I think the first thing to say is that, we always start with the coach's need. If the coach is looking for a particular position, let's just take an example. Let's say he's looking for a left back, a left-sided defender, he will then specify the attributes. That defender's got to be 6'1", has got to be able to move with the ball quickly, move without the ball quickly, be as good in offensive positions as they are in defensive positions, good in the air, good on the ground, whatever the attributes are. And what we do is we feed that specification into our data models. That then gives us a sense of the likely candidates across the world that fit those attributes. We then look at age profile, we look at contractual situation, we look at whether there's a propensity for a player wherever they are in the world to move to Europe, move to the UK, how they would adjust, we think, to the Premier League, and whether they've got the ability within them, from what we know, to be coached. Because part of our model is to buy young, coach and develop, and then sell high. And that actually then helps us to fund the rest of the club and to do what we need to do to keep the football club sustainable without having to keep drawing on the support of the owner for different funding. So for us, the data-led model is more than just recruiting players to play in our first team. We might be recruiting players to play in one of our development teams. We might be recruiting a player that we know at some point in the future is going to need to come into a position that we are likely to sell in the not too distant future. So wherever possible, we try and get the replacement for the player we're likely to sell through the door before we sell that player, because there's nothing worse in my job than if you've just sold a player, let's say Moises Caicedo, for £115 million to Chelsea, and then you go looking for his replacement in the market. Everyone knows that your pockets are bulging, and therefore it becomes a very difficult negotiation. But if you can bring in a Carlos Baleba, who effectively has become Moises' replacement before Moises leaves, then obviously you're in a better negotiating position, and therefore your model is more efficient. It's not a perfect science, Robbie. It's not something that we can say every single signing that we make works just because we're data-led. You still are dealing with human beings. People don't settle in a new country. Their families don't settle. They don't take to their new club, or their teammates don't take to them in the way that you'd hope. So there's a human element to every recruitment that we do, but largely we've been more successful than not over the past sort of half decade or more, and that's given us the chance to compete at a higher level perhaps than people realise we might.
Paul, there's a couple of things there.
Sorry, Moises, can I just follow up quickly on that? Because you make a great point that I was going to ask. You're scouting Robbie Mustoe. His numbers are good. His data's good. Everything's good about him. But he's actually a bad egg. He's not a very good person. How did you check those things? Because surely that becomes as important as the football ability.
Yeah, personality is really important. Character is really important. So we try and gather as much detail as we can around, players that Robbie might have played with, coaches that might have coached him, people that might have been around him, sponsors, media, members of the public, people that you come into contact as high-profile athletes. And we try and build a picture that is personality-driven as much as we've got the data on the technical side. And what we're looking for, of course, is a great combination of both things to be ticking every box. And then you've still got a long way to go because, is this player going to be affordable? Is the club he's at willing to sell him? Is the agent involved going to be helpful or unhelpful or too demanding? Can we meet the salary expectations? Does he understand our model, which is to actually bring young players in and either test them quite early in our first team or maybe put them out on loan so they have a bit more room to develop before they come back to our first team. So even when we've got all of the data components right and we've got a personality that we think is going to fit with our club and our squad, we've still got a fair way to go before a transfer gets done. And, I think one of the misconceptions of a lot of football fans and probably, many people even around the game is that these things can happen quite quickly. Very rarely in our model do things happen quickly. Sometimes we're tracking a player for 6, 12, 18 months, sometimes longer before we actually make the move to bring them in. And therefore the process is actually quite elongated. And of course, there's the old opportunity that might come along where you get a chance to sign a very well-established player that you know a lot about already. James Milner is a great example where you can get the deal done relatively quickly compared to one of these younger players that maybe you're investing several £1 million in to bring them in. But it's not an exact science, and recruitment of players is no different to recruitment of people in any industry. Human beings are complex, and not everything that you read or see in data necessarily manifests in real life, and that's part of the risk that we have to take every time there's a transfer window.
Couple of things to follow up there for me, Paul. Couple of points I want to make. Now most clubs are, know about your approach and maybe aren't quite as fine-tuned as you guys are doing it. But going back to the recruitment again and the data, just now, is there a supercomputer that is there? Do you have an algorithm or data? I mean, I think I know kind of partially the answer to this, but I think it's still interesting for our listeners and viewers to kind of it's crazy how many good players Brighton pick up at young ages, develop in the first team and sell for a huge amount of profit. Can you give us, I know you're not going to tell us all your secrets, but is there something that's unique about the data collated by Brighton Football Club?
Yeah, I think most football clubs in the world, certainly the top end of the game, have now got access to data, and that's only part of the challenge. Interpreting the data, using algorithms, using different data search techniques is something which we would call, I suppose, our special sauce, and that's something that's been developed over many years, is constantly refined. Is something that is, particular to us. It's unique to us. So whilst we hear about other clubs using data to recruit, and they do, and some of them are very successful at it as well, none of them are using exactly the same methods or techniques that we are. And again, it doesn't make us better or right and them wrong or worse. It just is our way of doing it, and it works for us. And I think the other thing that we're prepared to do is to fish in ponds that others perhaps don't go to. And, we look at the markets in Central and South America quite extensively, but not necessarily the ones that are obvious. The Argentinas, the Brazils are the more obvious ones. The Paraguays, the Ecuadors are perhaps the less obvious ones in that region of the world. But we understand those markets very well. We understand the quality that exists there. And I think the other thing that we have is an ability to bring these young players through a little bit quicker. We're more prepared, I guess, to play them into first team football in the Premier League a bit sooner. And of course, the bigger clubs don't have to worry so much about that, because typically their squads are deeper. They've got more established international players already available to play. And the younger players have actually got more to compete with in order to make that first team start. And sometimes that works in our favour, because it means we can blood a youngster earlier than perhaps another Premier League club would. And the best example of that probably is Moises Caicedo, who, a few seasons back got his opportunity because Yves Bissouma was injured and then suspended. And so suddenly we were forced into using Moises because he was the next cab off the rank in terms of a central midfield position. And I think he came in to a really big game we had away at Arsenal and was by far the best player on the pitch. And, from that moment onwards, Moises was pretty much a fixture in the first team. And then 18 months later gets sold for a British record transfer. That's sometimes, you both know, you've played the game. You need that break sometimes to get into the first team. For us, that break comes sooner typically for younger players than not. But even then, sometimes it's brought about by circumstance rather than design. And of course, then it's down to that young player to take their opportunity and to run with it, which Moises did. And he's a fabulous player and is now beginning to show the kind of form for Chelsea that he showed for us, which is great to see until we play them, in which case I hope he has a very quiet game.
Just another quick follow-up, Rob, if you don't mind. We've had conversations before, Paul, and I thought it was fascinating when you kind of explained the succession planning of key kind of people within your organization. Do you mind just sharing to, how that works and how you get ahead of managerial positions, technical positions, certain players, different positions, all roles, important roles within the club?
Yeah, I think in any other industry, succession planning is a normal management process. In football, for some reason, and I've been around now for nearly 26, 27 years in the game, succession planning hasn't been a natural management process. And I don't know why that is, but for us, it is very much a natural one. And what we try and do, first of all, off the field, we look at the top 20, 25 jobs in the football club that I would consider to be mission critical. And we try and assess where the executives that fill those roles are in their career life cycle with us. So have they recently joined? Are they still establishing themselves? Or have they been with us some time and they're more likely and more susceptible perhaps to move on either to a bigger job, a better paid job, or whatever it happens to be. And we then just create a little risk system. It's no big rocket science. It's traffic light, green is good, yellow, maybe there's a concern beginning to emerge. Red, there's definitely a concern, because either that person has told us that they want to try and progress and move to the next level, and it might not be with us, or we know that they're beginning to get calls from headhunters or other clubs who are offering them jobs. And then if we've got a lot of reds, then we've got some concerns, because we may be losing 2, 3, 4 or more of our key people at a particular given point in the near future. If we're mainly green on the chart that we produce, then we're probably in pretty good shape. But again, this isn't a rocket science type situation. We're just simply trying to get as many indicators as we can, as early as we can. And once we have those indicators, then we plan for what we might do. So if we've got a lot of reds, if we're about to lose, for example, a head coach because he's been outperforming and we know he's beginning to get onto the radars of clubs that might be bigger than us or pay him more, or for him to operate at an early level, then we want to know, who the next coach is going to be. And we start that work almost as soon as a new coach arrives, because you never know when you're going to lose a coach. We lost Graham Potter 3 years into the job to Chelsea at a time when the season was a month old. We had a plan, and Roberto De Zerbi was that succession plan. Fortunate for us, sadly for Shakhtar Donetsk in Ukraine, the war had broken out. The league had suspended. Roberto was available, and therefore we were able to move very quickly to bring Roberto De Zerbi in. But of course, at the end of last season, we decided mutually to part company. It was important again that we'd done our homework, and we knew Fabian Herzler was likely to want to join us if the opportunity became available. So again, there's no perfect science here that's involved. It's more about planning, trying to do the best homework we can do, and then when the need comes, hoping that all of the key elements come together at the right time.
Paul, can I just take you back to the managerial situation? The likes of Chris Hughton were probably part of the setup when you came into the football club. Lovely man, did a great job. You go through Graham Potter, Roberto De Zerbi, now Fabian Herzler. What was it with Herzler that surprised? I mean, he's 31 years of age. I mean, me and Musty could be his dad. We're old enough. This guy has come in, and as ever with Brighton, he's brought an inventive, creative, very positive, possession-based football. How's the process of finding those people, and how big a gamble is it to put somebody like that in terms of, I'm looking at Ruben Amorim now, who's going in at Manchester United, and he plays a distant system, and some are asking, well, how's it going to fit for Man United? How do you find that fit for your group of players with the manager?
Well, firstly, the most important thing for us is that we try and go through an evolutionary process when it comes to coaches rather than revolutionary. The biggest change we made to the makeup of our squad was when, after 5 years, we parted company with Chris Hughton. Chris did a fabulous job for us, got us stable in the Championship, out of the Championship, stable in the Premier League. And we then decided we wanted to change the style of our football. We knew that meant a change of coach, but we also knew it meant an evolution of the squad. And, in terms of the speed at which we needed to do that, it was more at that moment a revolution of the squad. And we made a number of different changes. Once you've got a squad, though, playing the style of football that you want and a head coach that is delivering that, then each change you make after that, you want it to be more evolutionary, because the cost of change of the squad, moving players out, bringing new ones in, can be really expensive. And so each coach that we've hired really, following Graham to Roberto to Fabian, has been more of an evolution of the same model of playing football that we've had with all of those coaches. And so it meant the squad hasn't had to change dramatically. Obviously, our model is to buy young, develop, sell, and then repeat. So, of course, there's been the natural changes from that model. But essentially, we're playing a similar style of football between Potter, De Zerbi, and now Herzler. And each one of them will have their own sort of slight variation on that. Graham's was a slower build-up. Roberto's was more attacking style, a little bit less concentrating on the back. Fabian is much more concerned of not conceding goals as well as getting forward. So they're similar models, but ever so slightly different emphasis within those models. But we've been watching what Fabian had been doing in Germany for a little while, and we were very impressed with the way he was coaching St. Pauli. We knew that he was operating with lower budgets than some of his Bundesliga 2 rivals. We knew he was getting results from playing a style of football that was very similar in some ways, in many ways, to De Zerbi's style. And we felt that with the squad that we had, if we were to part company with Roberto at any time, that Fabian would be a very, very good successor. Our challenge was St. Pauli didn't want to lose him. He got them promoted to the Bundesliga. He's highly rated by many clubs across Europe, and therefore we felt that we had to move quite quickly when it was clear that Roberto was leaving in order to secure his services. And obviously at 31. That's really young, for the Premier League. When I first started working football, I was not a dissimilar age to some of the older players. Then I became the age of some of their fathers, and now I'm the age of the father of the coach, which is really worrying for me personally. But at 31, Fabian made the first point to us that, he played until he was sort of 23. He'd been coaching pretty much from that moment onwards. And if we were looking at a typical manager with 8 or 9 years experience, which is what he had, they'd probably be in their mid-40s, having played until they were 35, and we wouldn't be worried about his age. And yet the coaching experience they'd had would be the same. So why would we worry too much about him being 31? And once we got our head around the fact that although he was young, he'd pretty much dedicated most of his adult working life to coaching and was obsessive about it and knew our squad inside out. He was able to literally recite to us every single member of our squad with incredible detail and almost encyclopedic knowledge. I think then we realized that we had a guy on our hands who was dedicated to his profession, but also had done a huge amount of work in order to meet us, to show us that he was prepared to step into our club and make the adjustment to the Premier League. And of course, again, these things are never guaranteed. You know, when you make a change of personnel at a head coach level, there's always going to be an element of risk. There's always going to be an element of, will it work? Won't it work? But all you can do is eliminate as many of the variables as you can to give yourself the best chance. And more importantly, or as importantly, to give that new head coach the best chance. And, you know, Fabian's made a fabulous start. He's incredibly mature for his age. He's taken to the club and the city and the Premier League very, very quickly, which we are really pleased with. He's got small character traits, which are very impressive. You know, he knows the first name of virtually everyone at the training ground already. You know, from some people that he very rarely interacts with to people that he sees every day. He's made an effort to go to watch our women's team. He's made an effort to come over here to the stadium to make sure all of the operational departments are aware of who he is and what he'd like from them and how they can help him. And I think, again, just showing maturity beyond his years, that a football club is not just about the first team. It's about the entire club. It's about all of the people that help those teams to perform, and realizing that as a senior role model within the club, he's got to make sure that he's visible and present and communicative with all those people as well. And again, I think for 31 years of age, that's a remarkable presence of mind and a maturity beyond his years.
Just thinking, Paul, about the summer actually, and of course we all know about the tremendous profits that this club has made on buying low and selling high. I did kind of raise an eyebrow at the spending of Brighton and Hove Albion this summer. That there was a big investment in players into the squad. Now, you know, I could ask you things about, are you always going to be a selling club? I just thought, is something different happening, Paul, where you're going to start reinvesting some of these profits and trying to attain a different position in that Premier League table?
Well, first of all, Robbie, I think every club's a selling club these days if the price is right. I think, you know, even if you're a Real Madrid or a Barcelona or a Manchester United or Manchester City, you'll be prepared to move players on at a particular moment in time. So I think that the selling club thing is just a simple economic fact that we all have to at some point be prepared to sell our best players. I mean, Gundogan going from Man City to Barcelona and back again maybe is a good example of a top player who's moving between top clubs. And that happens. For us, I think it was more a case of replenishing our stock, to be honest. I think we'd been through 3 transfer windows where we had reached certain selling points with certain players. And, you know, maybe during the campaign that we had in Europe, we saw for the first time, first of all, the depth of squad that you need to work across 4 competitions. We hadn't up until that point suffered as many injuries as we did last season. So a combination where our squad was maybe thinner than it might have been, with a few injuries that compounded that, with more games in more top competitions, I think we realised that we needed to replenish our stock. And that meant that this summer just gone was more of a buying window than a selling window. But, you know, I don't expect the chairman to carry on with that level of generosity. I would expect us to return to our normal way of doing things over the next few windows. And that's not to say we're looking to sell any of our current players, but we know who we are. We know where we are. We know what our place in the football food cycle is, if you like. And from that point of view, at some point in the future, I'm sure, you know, you'll see us back on that sales cycle again. But it was an exciting summer. It was historical. I think we were one of the 2 or 3 highest net spenders in European football, let alone in the Premier League. And of course, now we've got a fantastic squad of players. We are fully replenished. We do have more depth. We're not playing in Europe this year, so we were focusing on 3 competitions now, Premier League and FA Cup left for us, 2 competitions. And we think that might give us a little bit of an advantage in the second half of the season when some of our rivals around, you know, the top 10 positions in the Premier League are having to compete in Europe and maybe go deeper in the domestic cups as well. So we'll see. You know what football's like. It's beautifully unpredictable, and that adds to the stress and all the excitement.
You say, Paul, you know who you are as a football club. I think that's so important for clubs to do. But in terms of ambition now and success and where you're looking for. You had European football, as you say, for the first time. What a great adventure that must have been, and you must have learned so much from that. But where are Brighton now in the pecking order? Is it like a top 10 finish? You know, a good cup competition, maybe a bit of player trading?
Yeah, I mean, we have a very clear vision. We want to be a regular top 10 Premier League club. We want to be a regular top 4 Women's Super League club. And how we get there and what that looks like in any given season will obviously depend on so many factors, you know, form, fitness, competition, the strength or weakness of other teams around us. But we genuinely feel that if we're aiming at the top half of the table, it will help us not keep looking over our shoulders. I think if you're aiming just to stay in the Premier League, there's a danger that if you miss that target in any given season, you're in the drop zone. Whereas if you're actually aiming for the top 10 and you miss that target in any given season, then hopefully you're finishing mid-table just below it. You're not quite putting yourself in the same kind of peril. Now, that's easy to say and much harder to deliver, but we feel that we've learned a lot over our 8 seasons in the Premier League. We feel that the European campaign taught us even more. We know we're not the finished article. We're nowhere near established, whatever that word means in the Premier League. We just work really hard to retain what we've worked hard to get, which is a status in the Premier League. And we're working even harder to make sure that we can stay in the top half of the table. And each season that goes by, it gets even harder because other clubs are investing. Other clubs want to be where we've been for the last few years. They want to achieve what we've been able to achieve. But we always remind ourselves we haven't really achieved much yet. You know, this is only our 12th ever season in the top level of English football out of 125 years of existence nearly. So, you know, we're nowhere near established. We're nowhere near where we would like to be. We'd love to win a trophy. We'd love to have a crack at Europe again. But our first priority every year is stay in the Premier League, progress in the Premier League, be better, be stronger, be a bit wiser each season, and hopefully build from there. And, you know, we're also aware that 2 or 3 bad decisions, a string of bad results, injuries, suspensions, whatever, can put you in bad place in the Premier League. And, you know, we're very, very conscious and humble to know that we've got to work really hard to make sure that that doesn't happen. And that's always our first priority.
Paul, just kind of thinking bigger picture and longer term here as we kind of wrap things up a little bit here. You know, me and Robbie will get asked all the time from Americans, like, who should we support? What club should we go for? You know, I kind of go the whole remit of what you're looking for. It's like, and I can say that Brighton Hove Albion is a super run club and it's a progressive and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. How hard is it for you guys to grow the brand of a non-top 6, 8 club in a country like the United States? Of course, many people will listen and watch this podcast, but is that something you strive to do? And how difficult is it to kind of get in the conversation as much as some of the biggest clubs in the Premier League?
It is something we strive to do, and it is difficult. I mean, I think as always, you know, being a winning team helps. You know, if you can win football matches, your profile by definition tends to be higher, and therefore you attract more attention. So that's our first priority. But we also, you know, we're lucky. You see the names behind me. We're very connected with the US through the brands that we work with. And you know, that helps us as well because there's a natural recognition of us in the Premier League because we've got American Express on our shirts, Nike on our shirts, Kissimmee in Florida are our partner as well. And, you know, that helps us maybe have a higher penetration in the US than a lot of other clubs of our size. But we also have to work at it. So when we came over on the Summer Series, Premier League Summer Series in 2023, we were thrilled to play in Philadelphia, in Atlanta, and in New York. That gave us another step on our progress chart towards achieving, you know, interest in the US. We'd love to come back to the US either, you know, this coming summer, next summer, or the summer after, because we found it such a valuable exercise in building our brand. But there's nothing more powerful for a football club in the Premier League than to win things and to be a successful club. And, you know, as hard as it is against the bigger clubs, you know, we're a different club and we're very proud to be a bit different. And we play good football. We've got a great culture in the club. We do things the best we can in the right way. And I think that does attract a football supporter who's maybe hasn't chosen their Premier League team to us. And, you know, from that point of view, obviously, we're delighted. And the same in Japan. We were in Japan last summer. Having Mitoma helps there, of course. But also the Japanese people like our style. They like a culture of the club and the values that we have in the club. And again, we've gained a very big fan base in the Far East because of that. So it's a long-term process, Robbie, to be honest. This isn't something that's going to happen overnight. Manchester United didn't become, the world's, most famous football club overnight. It's taken them decades and decades and decades of playing great football with great players and doing the hard yards to achieve that status. And Liverpool the same, and some of the other clubs who are trying to topple those clubs are working just as hard. So yeah, we'll keep at it, and we're enjoying it. And as I say, we stay humble and hope that people enjoy what they see from us.
Finally, from me, Paul, just in terms of this football club, I think it's a benchmark for many other clubs, maybe who've come from the Championship, have to get used to the Premier League, make sure you stay in it, grow and build in it. Can you dream about possibly a Leicester City? Is there a dream that one year it could just be our year and we do the impossible dream?
You put me right on the spot, Robbie, aren't you? This is the career-defining moment where I make a big bold claim as an idiot for the rest of my life. No, I think Leicester had a fantastic season, didn't they? Everything kind of went for them, and good luck to them. They played great football. They scored fantastic goals. They maybe benefited from one or two of the bigger clubs that season not having the best of times, but you can only beat what's in front of you. You can only sort of take advantage of those situations if you're in a position to do so. So for us, I think the more realistic target is to try and land some silverware. We'd love a Carabao Cup or an FA Cup. That would be incredible. We'd love another crack of playing in Europe. We were so lucky last year to draw some of the biggest clubs in Europe, to play Roma, to play Ajax, to play AEK Athens, Marseille in our first European campaign. The fans couldn't believe it. Some English clubs get drawn to play in some far-flung places in Eastern Europe. We get some of the prime cities in Europe to play and against some of the biggest clubs. We were so lucky, but we enjoyed every minute of that experience, and we'd love to feel that again. We'd love to have the opportunity to do that again. So Premier League title maybe is a bit far into the future. Champions League the same, but again, why not? Brighton needs to sort of prove itself as a title winning team at some point, and by title I mean cup winning in some way. I don't see why not. I think sometimes you set too low ceilings for yourself when you're a club of Brighton's size, and actually, one of our club values is aim high, exceed expectations. They are good benchmarks for pushing our staff to be better. And when you've got players like James Milner in the club, Danny Welbeck in the club, you're not allowed to be average. You're not allowed to say that's okay where we are. Danny and Millie are pushing us every day to be better on and off the pitch. And that's why we sign players like that. That's why we brought in Adam Lallana when we did. That's why we had Pascal Gross for as long as we did. That's why Lewis Dunk has stayed here for such a long time, because these players don't want to be just average. They want to get to the highest point that they can. And if you're James Milner and you're Danny Welbeck, you've already been at that point and you want it again. So, from that point of view, it's great to be working with those sort of players, and they make a real difference here for sure.
Paul, we're going to have to wrap it up there. We've taken up far too much of your time. It's been brilliant, exciting, insightful to hear from you as you roll as CEO at Brighton Football Club. Look forward to seeing you, not least at the weekend against Manchester City, but the rest of the coming season. And wish you lots of luck for the coming days. So for the Two Robbies podcast, that's it for this week. Our special guest, Paul Barber of Brighton Hove Albion.
Thank you so much, Paul. Thank you.
Thank you, Robbies. Thanks very much.
Hi there, I'm Rebecca Lowe, studio host of NBC's coverage of the Premier League. Don't forget to hit subscribe to watch more videos all season long. And if you want even more Premier League content, from original series to live matches, head over to Peacock.